The great hall of Kepler Prime buzzed with voices from 100 different worlds. Ambassador Zara stepped up to the speaking platform, her blue skin shimmering under the bright lights. She looked out at the sea of alien faces that made up the Galactic Senate. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had 4 eyes or scales that changed color. But they all shared one thing. They thought they knew everything about the galaxy. Honored delegates, Zara began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. I come before you today to speak of an old story, a legend that our people have kept for over 300 years. Several senators rolled their eyes. The Dracani representative made a huffing sound through his nose slits. Everyone knew Zara loved her old tales. The ancient texts speak of a species called humans, she continued. They say these beings could fight for days without rest. They could survive in places that would kill most of us. When cornered, they became more dangerous, not less. Some stories claim they once held back the devourers themselves. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Valkyrian Admiral Kresh stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow over nearby seats. With respect, Ambassador, we have real problems to discuss. The Outer Rim pirates are growing bolder. Trade routes need protection. We cannot waste time on fairy tales. Zara's violet eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice calm. What if they are not fairy tales? Far across the galaxy, Captain Kyle Martinez floated in the command chair of his ship, the Terra Nova. The vessel was small compared to the massive warships he had seen in the old files, but it was fast and quiet. Perfect for watching without being seen. Kyle had been born on one of humanity's hidden colonies. Like all children there, he had learned early that humans were supposed to stay hidden. 300 years ago, something terrible had happened. The history books were not clear about what exactly, but it had forced humanity to retreat from galactic society. They had been watching from the shadows ever since. Captain, called out Lieutenant Maya Johnson from her station, I'm picking up something strange. It's not on any of our star charts. Kyle pushed himself over to her workstation. The screen showed a faint signal coming from deep space. It was weak, almost lost in the background noise of the cosmos. Can you clean it up? Kyle asked. Maya's fingers danced over her controls. Slowly the signal became clearer. It was not random noise. It was a message, and it was asking for help. The message repeated the same words over and over in an alien language that their computers struggled to translate. When the translation finally appeared on screen, Kyle felt his blood run cold. They have returned. The Devourers have returned. Anyone who can hear this, please help us. They are eating our worlds. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Brooks sat in her office deep underground. The room was plain and simple, with only a few pictures on the walls. One showed her graduating from the academy. Another showed her with her crew from her first command. The last one showed Earth as seen from space, blue and beautiful and fragile. Lisa had spent her whole career preparing for a day she hoped would never come. Humanity had built secret fleets and hidden bases throughout the galaxy. They had watched and learned and prepared, but they had stayed hidden, following the protocols set down centuries ago. A soft chime announced a visitor. Jake Thompson, her chief intelligence officer, entered carrying a datapad. His face was grim. Ma'am, Jake said, we've intercepted communications from 17 different systems in the past week. They're all reporting the same thing. Something is attacking colony worlds on the Outer Rim, something that matches the old descriptions of Devourers. Lisa felt her stomach drop. The Devourers were supposed to be extinct. The official galactic record said they had disappeared over 1,000 years ago. But the human archives told a different story. They said the creatures had not died out. They had only gone to sleep. How bad is it? Lisa asked. 3 systems have gone completely dark. No communications at all. Long-range sensors show the planets are still there, but... Jake paused. There are no life signs, ma'am. Nothing at all. Lisa stood up and walked to the window. It did not show the outside world. Instead, it displayed a view of space with stars twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, worlds were dying. What do the protocols say? She asked. Protocol 7, Section 4. Jake replied without hesitation. In the event that the Devourers return, all isolation protocols are suspended. Humanity is authorized to take any action necessary to protect galactic civilization. As if summoned by their conversation, another officer appeared at the door. Commander Amy Clark had been leading the rescue operations for refugees who had escaped the Outer Rim attacks. Her uniform was wrinkled and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Admiral," Amy said, "we have a problem. A group of alien ships just appeared at the edge of our space. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, begging for sanctuary." "What species?" Lisa asked. "Zenthari, ma'am. They claim to be survivors from the Nexus system. They say something consumed their homeworld in less than 2 days." Lisa closed her eyes. The Zenthari were an old race, one of the founding members of the Galactic Senate. If their homeworld was gone, then the situation was worse than anyone realized. "Bring them in," Lisa ordered. "Full diplomatic protocols, and Amy," she paused, "start spreading the word through our networks. Tell our people to prepare. After 300 years of hiding, it looks like humanity is about to step back onto the galactic stage." As Amy left to carry out her orders, Lisa turned back to the window. The stars looked the same as always, peaceful and eternal. But she knew that somewhere in that vast darkness an ancient enemy was stirring. The galaxy would need its legends to become real once again. Dr. Ryan Foster checked his equipment one last time as his ship approached the meeting point. He had spent years studying alien languages and cultures, but he had never thought he would use that knowledge for something like this. The New Horizon was humanity's first official diplomatic vessel in 3 centuries. It felt strange to be flying openly instead of hiding in the shadows. "Doctor," his pilot called from the front of the ship, "we have visual contact with the alien vessels." Ryan moved to the main window and looked out. 5 ships floated in space ahead of them. They were damaged and scarred, with burn marks along their hulls. These were not warships. They were refugee vessels, packed with survivors who had nowhere else to go. The largest alien ship sent a message. Ryan activated the translation system and listened as a voice filled with exhaustion spoke. "Unknown vessel, this is High Counselor Thex of the Zenthari people. We seek sanctuary. Our world is gone. Our fleets are destroyed. We have only these few ships left." Ryan took a deep breath and activated his transmitter. "High Counselor Thex, this is Dr. Ryan Foster representing the human government. We have received your request for sanctuary. Permission granted. Welcome to human space." There was a long silence. Then Thex's voice came back, filled with confusion. "Did you say human? That cannot be. Humans are legends. Stories told to children." "I assure you we are very real," Ryan replied. "Please prepare for docking. We have medical teams standing by." 3 hours later, Ryan sat across from High Counselor Thex in the meeting room of the New Horizon. Thex was tall and thin, with gray skin and large dark eyes. His hands shook slightly as he held a cup of warm liquid that the medical team had given him. "You truly are human," Thex said, staring at Ryan as if he might disappear. "In our archives we have stories of your people. They say humans could fight when all hope was lost. They say you never surrendered, even when facing certain death." "Those might be exaggerated," Ryan said carefully. Thex shook his head. "No. I think they were not exaggerated enough. The archives speak of the Battle of Crimson Gate, where 50 human ships held off 1,000 Devourer vessels for 3 days. They say your people sang as they fought, even as their ships were torn apart." Ryan felt a chill. He had read about Crimson Gate in the classified files. It had been humanity's last major battle before they went into hiding. 50 ships against 1,000. None of the human vessels had survived, but they had bought time for millions of civilians to escape. Meanwhile, in a different part of the galaxy, Colonel Sam Davis crouched behind a broken wall on the planet Kepler-7. His reconnaissance team had been sent to investigate reports of Devourer activity. What they had found was worse than anyone had imagined. "Lieutenant," Sam whispered into his radio, "are you getting this?" Lieutenant Maya Johnson was hidden in a building across the street, recording everything with her scanner. "Yes, sir. The readings are off the charts. These things are not like the ones in our history books." Through his binoculars, Sam watched. the creatures that had once been the stuff of nightmares. The Devourers were as tall as a human but moved like liquid shadow. Their bodies seemed to shift and change as they moved. But these were different from the historical records. They were bigger, faster, and they moved with a purpose that the old reports had never mentioned. "They're organized," Maya whispered over the radio. "Look at the way they're working together." The old files said they were just mindless eating machines. Sam nodded grimly. The creatures were building something in the center of the town. It looked like a massive web made of some dark material. And in the center of the web, something was growing. "We need to get this information back to command," Sam said. "Move out. Quiet and careful." As they made their way back to their hidden ship, Sam could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Devourers had evolved in the centuries since humanity had last fought them. The question was, had humanity evolved enough to meet this new threat? On Earth, President Kate Sullivan stood in the war room deep beneath the Capitol. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and tactical displays. Around the large table sat the top military leaders of humanity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kate began, "for 300 years we have prepared for this day. Operation Starlight is now in effect. We are ending our isolation." General Alex Wright, head of the Space Forces, spoke first. "Ma'am, our fleets are ready. We have 47 major warships positioned throughout the galaxy, along with hundreds of smaller vessels. Our crews have been training for this their entire lives." "What about our allies?" Kate asked. "The Xanthari survivors are providing us with current intelligence," Wright replied. "But most of the galaxy still thinks we're myths. The Valkyrian Empire has been contacted, but their Admiral Kresh refuses to believe we exist." Kate nodded. She had expected this. "Send Commander Rodriguez to make contact with them. Sometimes seeing is believing." 2 days later, Commander Tim Rodriguez materialized on the bridge of the Valkyrian flagship Dominator. The alien crew stared in shock as the human officer appeared in their transporter beam. Admiral Kresh, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like armor, rose from his command chair. "What trickery is this?" Kresh demanded. "Humans are legends, stories. You cannot be real." Tim smiled and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and suddenly every screen on the bridge displayed the same image: a massive human fleet moving through space. Hundreds of ships, from small fighters to enormous battleships, all bearing the blue and white colors of Earth. "Admiral Kresh," Tim said calmly. "I am Commander Tim Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. Our legends are about to become your reality. The Devourers have returned, and humanity is going to war." Kresh stared at the screens, his 4 eyes wide, with disbelief. In the background, his crew whispered to each other in amazement and fear. After centuries of hiding, humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The legends were real, and they were coming to fight. The alarm screamed across the Outer Rim colonies as the Devourers struck without warning. Captain Nina Bell gripped her command chair as explosions lit up the space around her ship. The evacuation fleet was trying to save as many people as possible, but the enemy was moving faster than anyone had expected. "How many ships do we have left?" Nina shouted over the noise. 15 transport vessels still operational," her communications officer reported. "But the Devourers are closing in fast." Through the main window, Nina could see the creatures swarming over the colony ships like a dark plague. The alien vessels were being torn apart in minutes. Families who had lived on these worlds for generations were being consumed along with everything they had ever known. "Ma'am," her pilot called out. "Lieutenant Commander Bell is requesting permission to engage." The enemy! Nina felt her heart skip. Paul was her husband, and he was leading the fighter squadron that was supposed to protect the evacuation ships. She wanted to order him to stay safe, but she knew he would not listen. He never ran from a fight. "Permission granted," she said, quietly. "Tell him to buy us 10 minutes. That's all we need." She watched through the tactical display as Paul's fighters dove toward the Devourer swarm. The small human ships moved like angry wasps, striking fast and hard before darting away. But there were so many enemies. Too many. Light years away, Fleet Admiral Joe Clark stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the same battle through long-range sensors. He was Nina's older brother, and seeing her in danger made his hands clench into fists. But he forced himself to remain calm. A good commander did not let emotions control his decisions. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the evacuation fleet is taking heavy losses. They need help now." Joe nodded slowly. "Signal all units. Operation Starlight is fully active. All stealth protocols are canceled. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity has been building for 3 centuries. Across the galaxy, hidden human bases suddenly came alive. Ships that had been waiting in the shadows for decades powered up their engines. Space docks that had been disguised as asteroids opened to reveal massive battlecruisers. Fighter squadrons launched from secret bases on dead moons. The human armada began to move. Commander Ben Lee sat in his strategy room aboard the command ship Defiance, staring at tactical displays that showed the true scope of the Devourer invasion. The creatures had hit 12 systems in the past week. Each attack was perfectly coordinated, as if controlled by a single mind. "They're not just eating anymore," Ben said to his alien advisor, Captain Luna Kim of the Zenthari. "They're planning, building something." Luna's large, dark eyes studied the data. "In our archives, there are references to a Devourer Queen Mind, a central intelligence that could control thousands of the creatures across vast distances. We thought it was destroyed long ago. Maybe it was just sleeping," Ben replied, "like the rest of them." He pulled up a new tactical display. "Look at their attack pattern. They're not hitting the strongest worlds first. They're going after specific targets, shipyards, military bases, communication hubs. They're trying to cut off our ability to coordinate a defense." Luna leaned forward. "Then we must strike before they can complete their plan." Ben smiled grimly. "That's exactly what I was thinking. But we'll need to hit them harder than they expect. Show them that humans don't just fight. We fight smart." On the surface of Kepler-7, Sergeant Max Turner and his Marine squad were making their last stand. They had been holding the evacuation point for 6 hours while civilian transports loaded refugees. The Devourers kept coming in waves, but the humans refused to give ground. "Turner," his radio crackled. "This is command. Evacuation is complete. Get your people out of there." Max looked around at his squad. They were exhausted, low on ammunition, and surrounded. But they were still fighting, still protecting people they had never met from creatures out of nightmares. "Negative, Command," Max replied. "We've got more civilians coming in from the eastern districts. We'll hold until they're safe." "Sergeant, that's an order." Max switched off his radio and turned to his squad. "You heard the man. We've got civilians to protect. Anyone who wants to leave can go. No shame in it." Not one Marine moved from their position. In space above the planet, Captain Rose Garcia led her fighter squadron in desperate holding action. Her ship was damaged and running low on fuel, but she kept fighting. Behind her, the evacuation transports were still loading people. Every minute she could buy meant more lives saved. "Rose," her wingman called over the radio. "We've got company, big company." Rose looked at her scanner and felt her breath catch. A massive shape was emerging from hyperspace. It was bigger than anything she had ever seen. The Devourer command. Ship was the size of a small moon and it was heading straight for the planet. But then something else appeared on her scanner, something that made her heart sing with hope. "This is Admiral Joe Clark of the Earth Defense Force," a familiar voice came over all frequencies. "To all human forces, this is your Admiral speaking. To all alien forces, this is humanity announcing our return to the galaxy. And to all Devourers listening," his voice turned cold as space itself, "you picked the wrong species to wake up." The human armada dropped out of hyperspace like an avalanche of metal and fire. Hundreds of ships that had been myths and legends suddenly filled the space around Kepler-7. The massive battleship Earth's Pride led the formation, its weapons already charging for battle. The aliens watching from their refugee ships could not believe what they were seeing. The legends were real. The humans had returned, and they had brought enough firepower to make the stars themselves tremble. Admiral Joe Clark looked out at the Devourer forces and smiled. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. Now it was time to show the galaxy why some legends should never be forgotten. The Battle of Seven Suns began at dawn on 3 different worlds simultaneously. Admiral Dan Foster stood on the bridge of his flagship Defiance and watched as the largest space battle in galactic history unfolded before him. The human Armada had finally revealed itself in full strength, and the sight was breathtaking. All ships report ready for combat, his communications officer announced. The Indomitable, Relentless, and Earth's Pride are in position. Dan nodded as he looked out at his fleet. These were the ships that alien cultures had whispered about in their oldest stories. Vessels that were supposed to be myths, now burning bright against the darkness of space. Behind them flew hundreds of smaller ships, each one crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Open a channel to all vessels," Dan ordered. Human and alien alike. The channel crackled to life, and Dan's voice carried across the battle zone. "This is Admiral Foster of the Earth Defense Force. For 300 years we have watched from the shadows. We have prepared. We have waited. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that calls this galaxy home. Today, the legends become real." On the surface of Kepler-7, Colonel Grace Young crouched behind a makeshift barrier as devourer creatures poured through the streets. Her ground forces had been fighting for 18 hours straight, but they refused to give up. The evacuation was almost complete, but almost was not good enough. "Colonel," her radio crackled, "this is Major Adams. We've got supply drops incoming from the fleet. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies." Grace smiled grimly. Steve Adams was the best logistics officer she had ever worked with. If he said supplies were coming, they would arrive exactly when and where they were needed. "Copy that, Major. Tell the fleet we're not going anywhere. These civilians get out safely, or we all go down fighting." Above them, explosions lit up the sky as human and devourer ships clashed in orbit. But Grace kept her focus on the ground battle. Every street corner her people held meant more lives saved. In space, Commander Noah Hayes coordinated the combined human and alien fleets with a skill that amazed even veteran commanders. His sister, Captain Zoe Hayes, led the deep strike missions that were hitting devourer supply lines behind enemy territory. The brother and sister team had become legends in their own right. "Noah," Zoe's voice came over the secure channel, "we've found something big. The devourers have been building some kind of structure on the dark side of Kepler-7's moon. It's massive." Noah studied the tactical display as Zoe's reconnaissance data came through. The structure looked like a giant web made of dark metal, with something pulsing at its center. "That's got to be connected to their queen mind," Noah said. "Zoe, can you get a strike team in there?" "Already working on it, little brother," Zoe replied with a grin that Noah could hear in her voice. "But we're going to need a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention away from the moon." Noah looked out at the battle raging around them. "I think I can arrange that." Lieutenant Tom Baker sat at his communication station aboard the command ship, managing the impossible task of coordinating dozens of different species in the middle of a massive battle. Each alien race had different communication protocols, different command structures, different ways of thinking about combat. But somehow, it was working. The Xanthari ships moved like dancers, their graceful vessels weaving between enemy fire to strike at weak points. The massive Valkyrian battleships served as mobile fortresses, their thick armor soaking up damage while smaller ships darted around them. And binding it all together were the human vessels, adapting their tactics to support whatever their alien allies needed. "Tom," Admiral Foster's voice came through his headset. "I need you to send a message to all ships. Tell them what we're really fighting for." Tom nodded and opened a channel to the entire combined fleet. "All ships, this is Communications Central. Remember why we're here. Remember what happens if we fail. The Devourers don't just kill. They consume everything. Every memory, every dream, every story that makes a species who they are. Today we fight so that the galaxy can continue to tell stories. We fight so that legends can be born." On the Valkyrian flagship, Admiral Kresh watched in amazement as human Marines boarded a damaged Devourer vessel. The creatures inside should have torn the humans apart in seconds. Instead, he watched as the Marines moved through the ship like a force of nature. They covered each other's backs, never left anyone behind, and kept fighting even when wounded. Incredible, Kresh murmured to his tactical officer. The legend spoke of human stubbornness, but this, he shook his massive head. They are fighting a ship that should have been abandoned. The hull is breached in 17 places, life support is failing, and they are still advancing. Through his sensors, Kresh could hear the human squad leader's voice over the radio. "This is Sergeant Turner. The ship is clear. Repeat, the Devourer vessel is secure. Beginning recovery operations for any survivors." Kresh had fought in dozens of battles, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not just brave, they were relentless. They simply refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. As the battle raged on, stories began to spread through the combined fleet. Stories of human pilots who kept flying ships that should have exploded. Stories of human engineers who repaired critical systems while under enemy fire. Stories of human medics who ran into danger to save wounded aliens they had never met. Galaxy was watching its legends come to life. And for the first time since the Devourers had returned, hope began to spread through the stars like wildfire. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were finally facing an enemy that simply would not quit. The humans had returned, and they were everything the legends claimed and more. The final battle began in the darkness between stars, where the Devourer home system pulsed with ancient evil. Admiral Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked out at the massive fleet that had followed humanity into the heart of enemy territory. Ships from dozens of worlds flew together, united for the first time in galactic history. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy readings from the central planet. Whatever the Queen Mind is planning, it's almost ready." Lisa nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggested that the Devourers were preparing to spread across the entire galaxy at once. If they succeeded, no world would be safe. This was humanity's one chance to end the threat forever. "Signal Captain Stone," Lisa ordered. "Tell her the mission is a go." Captain Eva Stone checked her equipment one final time as her assault ship approached the Devourer Queen Mind's fortress. The structure was even more terrifying up close than it had appeared on the reconnaissance photos. It looked like a giant spider made of dark metal and pulsing flesh, with thousands of Devourer creatures crawling across its surface like living armor. 5 minutes to insertion point," her pilot announced. Eva looked back at her strike team. Sergeant Jack Parker, their demolitions expert, was quietly checking his explosive charges. Chief Petty Officer Chloe Davis, their medic, was making sure everyone's medical kits were properly stocked. These were the best soldiers humanity had to offer, but Eva knew that many of them would not be coming home. "Listen up," Eva said to her team. "We all know what we're here to do. The Queen Mind is at the center of that structure. We get in, we plant the charges, and we get out. Simple." "What if we can't get out?" one of the younger soldiers asked. Eva met his eyes steadily. "Then we make sure the job gets done anyway. That's what humans do." The battle in space was reaching its peak as Eva's team made their approach. Human and alien ships fought desperately to keep the Devourer fleet distracted while the strike mission proceeded. On the bridge of the command ship, Commander Pete Miller watched the tactical display with growing concern. "Admiral," Pete called to Lisa Brooks over the communication channel, "the Devourers are starting to break through our lines. I don't think we can hold them much longer." Lisa studied the battle reports flowing across her screens. Pete was right. The combined fleet was giving everything they had, but the enemy had too many ships. Soon the Devourers would overwhelm their defenses and stop the strike team from reaching the Queen Mind. "Pete," Lisa said quietly, "I need you to buy us more time." Pete looked at his own tactical display and immediately understood what she was asking. His ship was positioned at the center of the human formation. If he moved forward to block the Devourer advance, he would be cut off from the rest of the fleet. It would be a suicide mission. "Understood, Admiral," Pete replied without hesitation. "It's been an honor serving with you." Pete's ship, the Valor, broke formation and charged straight into the heart of the Devourer fleet. His crew knew exactly what their captain was planning, and not one of them objected. They were humans. This was what they did. Inside the Queen Mind's fortress, Eva's team fought their way through corridors filled with nightmare creatures. The Devourers seemed to sense that something important was happening, and they threw everything they had at the human soldiers. But the humans kept moving forward, covering each other and never leaving anyone behind. "Charges are set," Jack reported as they reached the central chamber. The Queen Mind itself was visible now, a massive pulsing brain surrounded by writhing tentacles. It was the most horrible thing any of them had ever seen. "Chloe," Eva called to their medic. "How's everyone holding up?" "We've got 3 wounded, but everyone can still move," Chloe replied. "Let's get out of here." But as they turned to leave, the exit sealed itself behind them. The Queen Mind had realized what they were planning, and it was not going to let them escape. "Eva!" Pete Miller's voice came over the radio, filled with static from the battle raging in space. "The charges need to be detonated manually. The remote detonator won't work through the Queen Mind's shielding." Eva closed her eyes for a moment. She had known this might happen. Someone would have to stay behind to trigger the explosives and destroy the Queen Mind. Someone would have to make the final sacrifice. "Copy that, Pete," Eva replied. "Tell the Admiral that the mission will be completed." "Eva, no." Jack started to protest, but she cut him off. "That's an order, Sergeant. Get the team out of here. Use the emergency charges to blow a hole in the wall." As her team reluctantly prepared to blast their way out, Eva activated her communication system one last time. Her voice was broadcast. "To every ship in the human fleet, this is Captain Eva Stone of the Earth Defense Force. The Queen Mind will be destroyed in 60 seconds. Tell the galaxy that humanity kept its promise. We protected those who could not protect themselves. And tell them," her voice grew stronger, "tell them that some legends are worth believing in." The explosion that destroyed the Queen Mind lit up the entire star system. Across the galaxy, every Devourer creature suddenly stopped moving and collapsed. The threat that had terrorized civilizations for millennia was finally ended. 6 months later, Captain Andrew Scott stood in the new human embassy on Kepler Prime. Through the windows, he could see ships from dozens of worlds docked at the station. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity was no longer hiding in the shadows. "Captain," his aide announced, "the Galactic Senate is ready for your address." Andrew nodded and walked toward the great hall where he had watched Ambassador Zara speak of human legends so many months ago. Now it was his turn to address the galaxy, but this time he would not be speaking of myths and stories. Lieutenant Ian Cooper and Ensign Mia Foster stood at attention as Andrew passed. They were part of the new generation of human officers who would serve alongside alien allies in the years to come. The legends had become protectors, and the galaxy was safer for it. As Andrew entered the hall, he thought of all the humans who had died to make this moment possible. Eva Stone, Pete Miller, and countless others had paid the ultimate price to ensure that the galaxy could continue to tell stories of hope instead of fear. Some legends were born from imagination, but the best legends were born from truth.